Yeah, and the closest spotting as the cell service. One minute.
Yes, you bet.
They would have lost it anyway.
That's right, exactly. That's right.
I love it. Recycled rope from spears.
It's come a long way since they first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Anyway, here we are. It is 7 p.m. Thank you very much. Welcome to the May 17th meeting of the Town of St. Andrews Planning Advisory Committee. In front of us, we have the agenda, but I'm first just going to record attendance, and Mr. Tanner is not here tonight. So now we have the agenda in front of us. If anyone would like to make a motion, we'll move forward with this agenda. Do I have a seconder on that? Thank you, Councillor Hartman. Any discussion, edits, changes? If not, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye. None opposed. Thank you very much. We have adopted that agenda. Now we have our welcome to this meeting, and we recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Beskotomogari people. And now I guess I am looking for a declaration of conflict of interest, if any exist. There being none, fantastic. Minutes from our meeting from March 15th. I hope everyone's had the opportunity to review them and jolted everyone's memory as to what we talked about. If there are no
Just, Madam Chair, I just want to note that from the discussions on the mailouts, when we made the changes for Shamcook and Bayside, you'll note that the motion is changed within the minutes because it's actually more reflective of how the structure of the actual rules and regulations are. So it's more reflective of that, but still meets all the criteria that PAC brought forward. So I just want to make sure PAC was aware of that.
I don't think that was our most elegant motion that we ever made. I think we struggled with some of the verbiage on that. So thanks for cleaning that up for us. I appreciate that. All right. So minutes from March 15th. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes with the changes as noted? Friendly. Thank you very much, Mr. Kerr. Do I have a seconder on the minutes? Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Harland. Thank you very much. And any discussion? If there is none, all those in favor of adopting those minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those minutes are approved. Thank you very much. All right, so tonight we have no presentations or delegations, but we do have a zoning application. Oh, I've flipped over my page. Sorry about that. Here we go. All right, so our agenda item is PAC 230503. This is an amendment to MP 20-07 to the Town of St. Andrews Municipal Plan, MP 2001. This refers to PID 013-25505 on Rose Lane. So I believe that is this Xander's file, Mr. Gopin's file? Thanks very much. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the glare seems to be a bit better, but I will go ahead and share my screen presentation. All right. So this is pretty much the same public presentation that I gave a couple weeks ago in council. And as the chair noted, it is PID 013-25505. It's an unserviced 13.5 acre lot that is at the corner of Bar Road and Rose Lane. It's currently in the estate residential zone, and that zone allows for the proposed subdivision, but The municipal plan, MP 20-01, has mapped this as a residential growth area, part of a residential growth area. And there's a policy in the municipal plan that requires land in that area to be rezoned to the MR2 zone for development. So basically saying, if you want to develop here, it has to be MR2 high density development. So single family homes that would be allowed in the estate residential zone would not be allowed under the municipal plan, even though the zone allows for it. And the municipal plan sits above the zoning bylaw in terms of bylaw hierarchy, so it trumps. So the applicant would like to just do a single lot subdivision, doesn't at this time have the appetite for anything further. We've had some discussions around, what would be potential for MR2, and it really does seem like this is what is achievable for now. So they need an amendment if they want to do the one lot subdivision for an ER zone type development. The new lot and remainder would both have frontage on Bar Road, which is important. There are some issues with Rose Lane, which means it can't be subdivided off currently. And this is the subject property as you're heading from Mowat Drive out towards Minister's Island. This is not the most current picture. There hasn't been a lot of change. I think maybe some trees have come down in there, but it's still largely vacant, undeveloped. There's the zoning, the estate residential. And this is the municipal plan, generalized future land use map that ties into that policy about MR2 rezoning. And you can see the property there in the hatched area, showing that it is in that area. Here is the tentative plan of subdivision. So the lot in question is the kind of darker one right on the corner. There would be room left for an expansion of Rose Lane, which would allow more development off of Rose Lane, but that's something that if it happens will happen in the future. And there's enough room on the remainder for a road to be put in so that there could be further development of this property. So it wouldn't, the current lot would not impact further development of this property or other properties. That's just what the bylaw map looks like. Basically removing that small section from the residential growth area. And here is the specific municipal plan policy that I was talking about. And it is important to note that it says if it has the potential to limit the full desired development envisaged by the municipal plan. And again, this is how land could be developed in that area based on the policy. And this specifically is where it refers it to the Section 59 Community Planning Act rezoning and development agreements and servicing agreements. So there's a high standard, high bar to develop in this zone. Council of the Day thought it was important that there be areas in town designated for high density growth, and this was one of them. That being said, it is a relatively small portion of the overall residential growth area. And one of those municipal plan policies did refer to the full vision. So there is still a lot of potential for future higher density development further on the lot and in the area in general. And there's, as I said before, there would be space left adjacent to Rose Lane for expansion of the right-of-way, which would allow further development. Any future development that isn't going into the MR2 zone, which would still require public hearings and development agreements and site plans and all that kind of process and views from PAC as well. So it's not doing anything to the rest of the residential growth area. It's just this basically 1 acre lot of the subdivision. One of the things I have spoken to council about is it has been challenging, especially for this particular developer, to be able to achieve that full vision. And it took a lot of conversation to get to even this type of subdivision that would kind of work in the estate residential zone. So one piece of it, well, one kind of thing I've asked council to consider is creating actual their own kind of site plan and own kind of layout for future streets and future servicing for this area. So I think that would help developers be able to achieve that vision a little better if the vision was clearer. Because currently it's there's no services that run out there, so it's very challenging to actually develop higher density stuff, but it's kind of locked in this holding pattern until that can happen. And the town, realistically won't bring servicing out there for some time. So it is understandable, in my opinion, that there would be some relief for a private developer on those requirements. So that's it for my presentation, and I will turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gopin. So we are going to be providing some views to council about this. But if anyone has any questions of Mr. Gopin, now is the time to ask. Okay, Councilor Hansen, yes.
So I just want to clarify, Xander, what you said is that the proposed amendment will not impact future high density proposals, correct?
Correct.
Anything
Thanks.
else? Thank you. Anything else from the committee?
Xander, how much property is left between the edge of the 1 acre and not towards Road Lane, but to the property line on the other side? Do you have an idea of that? Enough to find another road maybe, or
Yes,
what?
yes, it's at least 20 meters. Which would be the requirement for the subdivision. That was something I discussed with the surveyor and the developer. If you're going to do the subdivision, there really has to be a way to access that back portion, even if Rose Lane isn't further developed. So that was something that I really pushed for, was to have that ability to keep subdividing or keep developing for higher density back there.
Okay.
Did you say that's between Rose Lane and or between the two lots? Or-
Between two lots,
Okay,
from the lot
yeah.
to the lot line.
That was my question too.
Yeah.
20 meters?
All right. Any other questions, or did someone want to take a stab at the motion that's been suggested? Adding some flavor? If it's just as simple as we support the amendment, that would be enough as well.
Okay, I'll put the motion forward that that the PAC has no objections to the rezoning of the 1 acre lot on Bar Road as presented. Does that work?
I will wordsmith something on that. I think I get the,
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
I'd second that motion. Whatever the word Smith's motion is.
I'm just going to indicate that the PAC has no objections to the subdivision plan for PID 013255505. If
Yep.
that's all right. Do I have a seconder on that?
Second that.
Second.
PAC Kerr, just so for record, can you just put your question out?
Pardon me? Oh, I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
All right. So all those in favor of those views to council, please. Oh, hello, sorry. Okay, so did you want me to reread what I'm going to write down? Mr. Nopper does. All right, so PAC has no objections to the subdivision plan for PID 013255505. And if if there's no edits or anything, all those in favor of my writing that, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And none opposed. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, our next agenda item is, there are no variance applications, but our next agenda item is terms and conditions application for a fence at 228 Montague Street, PID 013-20787. And so I guess we'll turn it over to Ms. Pung.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and let me share my slides with the committee. Perfect. So good evening, everyone. I have a terms and conditions application for your consideration tonight. The subject property is 228 Montague Street, which is located at the corner of Montague Street and Frederick Street. This property is zoned serviced residential, and it's also located within Town Plat. The applicant of this proposal is Harbor Town Builders, and they propose to build a wooden 8-foot fence in the rear and the flankage yard of this property. Some of you may notice the height, and yes, they have received a 1.4-foot height variance from the development officer. And a development officer does have the authority to grant height variances for fence under the Community Planning Act. And what's requesting PAC's consideration tonight is to apply terms and conditions to a portion of this proposed fence that is located within the flankage yard. The bylaw says when you have a fence located within the front and flankage yard, and when this fence is over 3.3 feet in height, PAC may apply terms and conditions. And I know there's a bit of a confusion on what portion triggers terms and conditions. So let me explain that with a site plan of this project. As you can see on the right of my slide, here is an aerial view of the property. The bottom of this site plan is, let me just turn on my pointer so I can point on my slides. So this side is the Montague Street side of the property, which is also the front yard. And on the right side is on the Frederick Street side is the flankage yard of this property. And the site plan mostly shows the rear yard of the property where the fence will be located. And as per the definitions in the St. Andrews zoning bylaw, the yellow shaded area is considered the rear yard of the property, and the purple shaded area is considered the flankage yard of the property. So the portion of the fence that is located within the purple portion, the flankage yard, is what triggering terms and conditions. And the portion located within the yellow area, the rear yard, does not trigger terms and conditions. So we're considering the purple area, not the yellow area tonight. And some of you may already see constructions happening on this property is because they have received a partial approval development permit to build a non-flankage yard portion of the fence because they don't need terms and conditions. So hopefully that answers some of the questions, but if you have more questions, definitely ask them after my presentation. And the only reason why they have fence located within the flankage yard is because of this heat pump, and they want to, of course, screen in the heat pump and not leave it out. And there is no other way to route the fence out of the flankage yard, and that's why it's triggering terms and conditions. And here are some more pictures. On the left is the rendering of this project from the view on Frederick Street. The fence, as you can see, is in a consistent style with the existing house, the Chase residence. So this clapboard, consistent heritage style is very important in this project. And on the right is a site photo of the property. So it's from the same viewpoint as the rendering. So it's a picture taken from Frederick Street and is looking into the rear yard where the fence will be located. When considering terms and conditions, the St. Andrews zoning bylaw provides, the St. Andrews zoning bylaw tells PAC what to look for and what to apply. under section 2.33, it says when applying terms and conditions, PAC should make sure that those terms and conditions protect, number one, properties within the zone or in abutting zones, B, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public, and C, to protect the integrity of the objectives and policies established in the municipal development plan. In this case, for a fence, the only applicable policy is in the secondary municipal plan that says when you construct a fence located within town plat, that should be built with high quality materials. And that is also one of staff's recommended conditions for this project. Staff also conducted consultations with the neighbors and also consultation with Public Works, and Public Works has no concerns. So based on all the information, staff recommends that the Planning and Advisory Committee of the Town of St. Andrews apply the following terms and conditions to the proposed fence located in the flankage yard. Number one is the applicant shall ensure that no municipal infrastructure is damaged during fence installation. I know Public Works doesn't have any concerns, but still, it's good to make sure to double check with them before installing the fence so that no infrastructure is damaged. And number two, the fence shall be built with high quality materials as presented in the development permit application. And the fence shall be properly maintained to not become a hazard to the safety of the public or become dilapidated. Again, this is to protect the integrity of the municipal plan and also to make sure that this does not become a hazard to the public. And the third recommended condition is that no fence shall be electrified or incorporate barbed wire or other sharp, dangerous materials in its construction. This is just a standard requirement for all fences built under the St. Andrews zoning bylaw. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pung, and we appreciate that. I think there's certainly some questions coming from the committee regarding this fence. I just had one question though before I turn it over, if I could. The portion that has been erected looks like it's really close to the other property on the Frederick side. Have we checked to ensure that the setbacks for this fence that's already been built have been identified and respected?
Yep, this application has been reviewed that the fence meets setback requirements, and the contractor is informed that they cannot build the flankage yard portion until PAC applies terms and conditions tonight. So technically, as the permit stated, they should only be able to build the rear yard portion of it, and it should comply with the site plan they submitted. So it should have a proper setback.
Okay, should have. Okay. It's just touching the existing fence. That's why what made me ask on the Frederick side. Okay. Does anyone else from the committee have any questions to pose at this time?
Vivian, so my question is, so you haven't issued a building permit, or the commission hasn't issued a building permit for this property yet, correct?
So it would be a development permit for the fence, and
Yes.
a development permit has been issued for the portion of the fence that does not need terms and conditions. So it's the fence in the rear yard of the property.
Okay, so I'm assuming it was you that would have, or the commission, that everybody that would have given the overall variance. What brought you to issue the height variance of 1.4 feet after the 6.6 feet? Well, what did you use as a guide in the town of St. Andrews where we have a bunch of other 8-foot fences? Or is this the first ever, is my first question.
Yeah, so under the Community Planning Act, a development officer can certainly issue a fence height variance after examining the property, examining the neighboring properties, and a lot of different factors for sure. And if it's determined that this is a reasonable request and it will be a desirable development for the property, then the height variance could be issued. And for this particular case, a lot of factors are examined. For example, the heritage consistency with the house is definitely a big plus. And also, the fence is mostly located within the rear yard. And under the zoning bylaw, actually, in a side yard and a rear yard, people can build a fence up to 8.2 feet without any problems if it's a metal fence and it has a certain grid size. But for this particular property, like we said, this is a heritage residence, and to build a clapboard style wood fence would actually fit better than a metal fence that's already allowed. So based on many factors, the development officer issued a height variance.
Okay. Second question then, or third question or her, we're getting around to this. Is there any follow-up by your department? You've clearly told the developer not to build the fence. Has anybody ever driven by the property in the corner of Montague and Frederick to make sure? Like Vern or Mike or any of the commission?
Yeah, so our building inspectors regularly do site visits. So we would, whenever they see something pop up, they would communicate with colleagues in the service commission. And also if, let's say, a resident of St. Andrews sees this happen and they don't know whether or not this has a permit, they can contact us or contact the enforcement officer of the town of St. Andrews to follow up. But for sure, when we issue a building permit or something with terms and conditions, we would follow up to make sure that it's compliant.
Okay, the third question then. So you stated earlier in your presentation that you clearly told Harbortown Builders not to build the fence. The fence is already built. On the
Part that needs terms and conditions has not been built.
this section on Frederick Street is already built.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
Beyond, so they'll be on.
Yeah, so at the other section on Frederick Street has actually already been built. And the only thing they haven't included is the gates.
So that section's allowed because it's in the rear. That section's the one that's receiving terms and conditions, but it is built right now.
Yeah. Yeah, they,
Ms. Pung, just so you're aware, through a photo that PAC Simmons does have, the section that's been requested for terms and conditions has been built.
Okay, so that really shouldn't happen because they should wait. And as I told them, they should wait until PAC applies terms and conditions tonight. But really, this is a conditional allowed use. So technically they're allowed, but with terms and conditions. So when they build this fence without having terms and conditions applied, they really run the risk of, build something already that doesn't meet PAC's terms and conditions. So they are taking on the risk themselves when they go against the policy.
okay. I'm done for now. Thank you, Vivian. Sorry. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Mr. Ingles.
Hi, Vivian. I just have a few questions in regards to the fence. I know you say it's allowable in rear yard for this property. Is there any consideration that it's the flankage yard of the next property?
Oh, sorry. Can you speak to the mic? I missed most of your question. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So I know you can build up to this height in a rear property of the rear yard of the 228 Montague. My issue is that it's a flankage yard for the house next door on Friedrich. So is there any consideration for that property?
So when we issue the height variance, we have consulted both immediate neighbors of this property. So the one next door on Frederick and the one next door on Montague. And both of them have given a letter of approval or a letter of support for this height. So they have no problem with it.
Okay, so then the other question or the other comment I want to say is that this is a visible fence from the street. It's not, to my mind, it's not a rear property. It's not a rear fence in the back of someone's property. It's visible by the street. And what we're considering right now is putting up walls, not fences. These are 8-foot high walls. And I don't really think that's the direction we should be going down as a community that wants to be neighborly. It's not a neighborly fence, it's a solid wall. There's no porous nature to this wall at all. It's completely wood from the ground to 8 feet high. That's a wall, it's not a fence. And I think we as a town and as a commission and as whoever, we need to start looking at our fence bylaws. I've mentioned this before, and we're getting a really big grab bag of different fences, and we need to have some more regulation on this, I feel. That's just a general comment, but really, this is not a fence, it's a wall. It's an 8-foot high wall, what we're making, that's visible from the street, from public realm. We shouldn't see that when we're walking along the street.
Yep, that's definitely a valid concern. So there are a couple of ways to address this, of course. This height variance is granted by a development officer under considerations. Of course, there are pros and cons, and the decision is made after weighing both pros and cons. But if, like you said, there are some concerns with the current provisions of fences in the zoning bylaw, the PAC can definitely discuss it as a whole and provide some suggestions or comments to council. So next time when there's an overhaul of the zoning bylaw, or if there's an administrative amendments to the zoning bylaw, that would be included in the package. And also another way is if let's say we want to amend the procedure of approving fences, that's also possible. So right now, both development officers and PAC have authorities to grant fence variances, and those authorities are mutually exclusive under the Community Planning Act. So if it's a variance granted by PAC, then development officer cannot re-examine or overturn it, and it's vice versa with development officer variances. But municipalities can have their own internal procedural policy that says we want all fence variances to be considered by PAC, or we want certain fences, let's say fences within front and flankage yard, to be considered by PAC. So those could also be considered and included in PAC's procedural bylaw. And again, I think this is something that PAC can discuss as a whole. And if PAC thinks it's desirable, they can certainly bring it up to council, and council can include that in PAC's procedural bylaw.
Okay, thank you. I just feel that fences that are within the public realm, we really should have a comment on. The only other thing is with that development officer and us having sort of like the same say, it seems like it's whoever gets through the file first gets to like lay the groundwork to begin with. Like if this came in before the development officer said we can increase it by 1.4, we'd be commenting on that here. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so if PAC think it's beneficial to amend the procedure of reviewing fence applications, like I said, that could be something that's something that could be brought up to council. And if that's passed by council, that would be the procedure that we use to review fence applications in the future. So next time, fence applications would be discussed in front of PAC if that's the change to the procedural bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I'm gonna give you time to consider all this, Kevin.
Huh? Oh, no, not yet.
No, well, just, okay. So if there's no further discussion, I guess at this time we would be looking at the motion. Any further discussion that comes out of that? There's no, I will take it that there's no presentations from the applicant or anything? I shouldn't have just assumed that. Sorry about that. I don't know if we're going to be able to get a motion on the table here, ladies and gentlemen.
We can still have discussion.
Yes.
Vivian, I got a quick question, and I see Xander's on there now. I got a quick question then. If this ended up getting not dealt with tonight, because you said you were very specific in there, in when you were talking to developers not to build that section until we came here, we don't have the right to tell them to remove it until it's dealt with. Like, I'm trying to get around. Yeah, procedure, right? You've told them not to build it. They clearly built the section and it's painted, it's all done. But I'm not in a position to let this stand. So where do we go from here? Some direction.
You want me to jump in, Vivian?
Sure, yeah, I will add after you've stated
Okay.
your points. Yep.
So they have well, they have a permit for most of the fence. They built something without a permit, so it's an unpermitted structure. That is something that could be enforced if this is tabled tonight. Although I wouldn't necessarily recommend tabling just so that there is an enforcement action. We generally also we work with town staff to figure out enforcement priorities. So there's probably all sorts of zoning infractions that go on from time to time that completely fly under the radar, and some that are picked up on and some that are enforced upon. So, I mean, this one is obviously known about. It's not flying under the radar. And basically there would be, typically when something like this is found out, there's a discussion between town staff and us, and sometimes it goes to council if that's an enforcement priority. And if it is, then basically we would go through the process of issuing a stop work order. There's a few steps that have to happen, some documentation. Really, it's going to be at the town's discretion, whether it's seen as, we're going to bring this into compliance through, if they need an application, then they'll try that. And if not, then, it comes down. Or if it's seen as, enough of a priority that it needs to be removed and the site be returned to its initial state until a decision is made. So it kind of would go up the chain. I don't think that PAC would have the authority to start an enforcement action. That's really something that has to come from the town itself, through senior staff usually. But basically that would be the discussion if this is tabled and not dealt with tonight. Now, if there are conditions given that can't be met, then that would have to be dealt with, and there would certainly be enforcement around that. So an enforcement action is quite possible. But I wouldn't encourage tabling just so that there is enforcement, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't recommend a punitive approach necessarily, but it's completely at PAC's discretion at how they make motions and proceed with the file. But enforcement is certainly a possibility, and that could be waiting until things come into compliance. It could be returning the site to its original state.
Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Ms. Penn?
No, I basically have the same opinion.
Oh, okay, okay. It's an uncomfortable position to be in, but we have to.
I'll make a motion. I'm not scared.
I'm gonna make a motion that we table this application for variance. Of the terms and conditions and send it back to the town.
Is there a seconder for that motion? We have an opportunity for some further discussion.
Just help me understand why.
This isn't the first fence that's been built with people. Like we had one in November and I wanted to make it very clear that one in November, we came to the November meeting for the same application, somebody building a fence, and I drove by and took pictures of it. The fence was already built. And we hadn't even given the authority to build the fence and the permit hadn't even been issued. And I wanted to make sure that, like at the time we were dealing with Xander and Vivian and saying, make it very clear to the applicants that they shouldn't be building a fence until PAC adds its conditions. Or just take fences away from us and leave it with them and we don't ever deal with them. Because people tend to build and then deal with the circumstances. Last time we passed it to bring it into conformity, but it had already been built before the process. So why is there a process? Why do they go to them to apply and then come us to PAC for requirements for us to add some direction when they just build it anyways? And then we have no input. So why are we even seeing these in front of us? And as far as I'm concerned, wasting my time on an application when people are just going to build it anyways.
So thanks for clarifying. The concern I have is that are we mixing up a disconnect in process with an actual applicant? So what I understood Vivian to say was that if we as a PAC want to make a suggestion to council that either all fences come to us or potentially no fence variances come to us, then we can do that, right? That's a that's a discussion that would need to happen. PAC would make recommendations to council, council would make a decision, right? So, and have to change the bylaw. So I think that based on the conversation that this is the second time, that maybe it's very timely that we have that conversation. I would have concern about implicating a resident in the disconnect of processes, right? Because it seems unfair. To me, it seems unfair that a resident of the town of St. Andrews gets caught up in an issue that really is a process issue between us and the commission.
Back in November, I wanted to make it clear, we passed the one in November, built as is.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make it clear to the planners at the time to make sure that they tell people not to build it until this is part of the due process is coming to BAC.
Right.
And Vivian was very clear that she told Harbortown Builders not to build it.
Right.
They have been duly notified that they were not supposed to build it. And whoever built it. But if the process is going to be there, we either enforce the processes or not. Or like Xander would say, just pass it and then it brings it into conformity. But I can't keep doing that, like, because everybody will just go build a fence and not worry about the building permit and we'll bring it into conformity because we'll pass it. We're going to continue to do that, or we continue to follow the process that are in place, set up by the town and council, and the act and the PAC, or we don't follow them. And at this point, this is my second one. I'm not willing to see a third one next month that already gets built, or the fourth one that month after, because building season's coming. We're going to see this over and over. Sending a message back to council to say maybe all fence variances, and that is worthy of a discussion after this, is that all variances come to PAC, or we'll just send them all to them and let them deal with them.
Mhm.
Right? But we reestablished the PAC from the the Provincial Planning Commission
Mhm.
for us to have some controls in our town and develop the way we want to develop. That's why we're back here, right? Because we all believe in the same thing. I love my community. I love my town. But anyways, that's where I'm coming from. I'm just going to stop.
I think also visually, if you look at that fence walking down the street, it's a wall. I don't know whether you walk down there along Peter to look at it, but it's an imposing wall. If it was at the rear of the property, it's not seen from the public right away, fine, but when you're walking through there, and so to me, it's like, what signal are we giving people that we're building walls around our properties? It's I really, really think that fence bylaw needs to be looked at.
Well, yeah, and I'm not disagreeing, but what is the remedy for the existing wall? I mean, that was the design that they chose, and that's
Well, yeah, we've been dealt
a bad hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
by having it allowed, being approved as a development officer. In my mind.
But we have to be thinking of what is the desired outcome, like what is the remedy? And I just don't know that there would necessarily be a remedy for what you're describing.
I mean, there could be a redesign of the fence. I mean, I know it's 8 foot solid. I mean, I know I've seen other fences in town, and you can start like sort of carving the top of them so it's a little bit more porous, so it's not completely solid, so it does have some relief through there. I know that. I'm not sure whether that was the intent, whether they'd be open to that, but I just feel that it's really not becoming.
There's no bylaw that governs that, though.
And I guess that's the concern I have. As I think Xander said, I mean, there are infractions. Some are known, some are not known. Some fly under the radar, some are clearly visible.
Right. Mhm.
I am just very reluctant to draw a firm line in the sand for this particular request based on the fact that we've got a process issue that we clearly have to talk about and make some decisions or make some recommendations to council. I think that causes undue hardship.
So one of the reasons I'm making a stand on the 8 foot is because a few years back, when our fence bylaw was in, and it was, I mean, you lived here at the time, you might not have known it, but we had a 5 foot, right? And they were in front of PAC all the time, and she would see 100 of them because everybody was building 6 foot panels, right? And then so PAC said, we need to go out and do a survey, did a lot of work, put a lot of work behind it, and made it 6 feet because everybody builds 6 foot panels, right? And honestly, from my personal opinion, I don't see what the difference is. Like a 6 foot high fence is a pretty tall fence. That's probably higher than most people. And I know that their job, they can do it. The planners, I'm just having a hard time where we come up with 8 foot fences, because soon 8 foot fence is going to be the standard in St. Andrews. Right? You might not think it's going to be. This is the start of the road down. And I just can't go there. Right? Like, I mean, I want to talk to the town. Either we give them all fence bylaws and they can deal with the whole thing and we don't worry about it, because this has clearly been built when they were told not to. So it doesn't, we're saying it doesn't really matter. Like, that's where I'm coming from, right? But it does matter, right? The process matters.
Right, but the planners, and I'm still going to use the fact that I'm new. So the planners were able to approve the back fence, an amendment to the back fence, because that's within the jurisdiction, correct? It's because it was the flankage yard that had to come to PAC. So I don't disagree with you, Kevin. I think there needs to be an open conversation around, does this make sense how we've got it divided up? Either, you know, it goes one way or it goes the other way. All fence requests come to the PAC, or all fence requests go to the commission. I think that the process creates some challenges for residents. I clearly agree with you on that. I just disagree around the fact that it's at the expense of this resident who is then caught in the middle. I think that's wrong, in my opinion. You're done.
Yeah, I agree with everything, actually, everything that's been said around the table here tonight. There are processes in place for a reason, and having done this in my past life, I've seen this come to the table more often than once. On numerous occasions, people had built things that were in nonconformity. They didn't have a permit for it. They built it wrong. They built it whatever. And those processes are in place to alleviate that. They're not supposed to do it. How do you deal with that after the fact? Sometimes the process has to be changed. I think this is where we're at tonight, is that this fence process, or we're dealing with fences tonight. They may come up with something else later down the road, who knows? But as far as fences go, we need that discussion with council. We need that input here to be able to take that to council. But I can't disagree with Annette either to say that are we making the stand tonight against this property owner that's not really in the best interest. I certainly get where everybody's coming from. I understand it completely, that yes, it was built and it shouldn't have been built, but it is the process that is not seemingly correct. It seems backwards. I agree with you 100%. It seems backwards. If it's going to come to anybody, it should come to us first for input before it goes to them and gets dealt with for a development permit or anything like that. So, but I think those conversations need to be had. That process needs to be in place to be able to change the bylaw or the process and how this committee deals with those things. So I don't know. I'm still considering the motion, but I can't put my finger on it yet.
The biggest issue, one of the biggest issues I have is that we as taxpayers are putting out to money, and I love the work that you guys do, because it takes a lot of work off of our shoulders when we consider motions such as this or subdivisions and so on and so forth. I know Vern and Mike are around town a lot. I'd love to know when something is on the table, building permit has been issued for an 8-foot fence, that you're not watching it more. And I know this isn't the only project going on. I understand that, but I just like to know how it got built without not being seen by the building inspectors. They've been working on that house for 8 months or 10 months. And you would think that they'd be around. They built the garage. They had the 8-foot fence. They had the deck on the back. That how could it just be casually missed? We pay for the service, and our tax dollars pay for the services, and it got missed. And that's that's really where I'm coming from, right? Is we're paying for a service so this doesn't happen, so we don't have to deal with issues like this. You've advised the client also not to do it. You've advised Harbor Town Builders not to do it as well. I know where we're at. We're at a tricky road, but I'm also at the point where we did the one in November and we said we'll pass it because we'll bring it into compliance. We have other issues on the table now, of course, because this is the first time I've also ever heard of that the development officers can approve some of the stuff, but you could have just approved the whole thing and not, you know what I mean? Like anyways, it's totally tricky, but the height variance was approved. We may or may not improve that, but you've seen it within your realm and you have that power. I understand that. But we're in this is where we're at now because of it all.
Oh, Ms. Punk, yes.
Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you. If I may add to this discussion, I definitely understand it's a valid concern. People build stuff without a permit. That's something we struggle with all the time, not just in St. Andrews. Our building inspectors on the road, they're finding people building stuff without a permit all the time. And I think at least half of their time or more than half of their time are spent on stopping people from building stuff without a permit. So it's an ongoing process to educate residents in our area that they should at least call or come to us before they build something. So it's definitely not a special circumstance, and it's not just fence in St. Andrews. It's not a magic cure that can there's no magic cure that can happen overnight to, just magically letting people know that they need a permit or they don't need a permit for something. So in my opinion, it's taking time, and we are doing our best to make this a better situation. So more and more people are getting aware that they should get a permit or at least call us before building anything.
I just wanted clarity from Vivian. This is all. So the people who applied to build the permit, the fence, or people who applied for the fence in the permit was not the homeowner. It was Harbor Town Builders, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a company that's been around town for a while that should know enough to follow the process. And you clearly told them that they didn't have a permit to build that section. Correct?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm done talking. I've taken up too much time. Thank you. Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Xander.
No, it's great discussion. Don't apologize for taking up time. We need to get these things out. It's better than sitting quietly. So we do. Yes.
Yeah, just one last comment is I know we said there was one we had in November, so maybe we missed our opportunity in November, knowing this would probably come again, and it's probably going to come again and again. So again, I just reiterate, we need to have this discussion regarding the process and how we're going to deal with this and make our recommendations to council moving forward. I think we have to do that right after this, but at the end of the day, is that going to circumvent this development at this time? I mean, I think we just, it's what we have in front of us is what we have in front of us, and moving forward, we've got to change what we need to change in order to make it better. So that's mine.
All right. One more call around the table. If there are comments, we do have a seconded motion on the table to, on the table to actually table this application. We've had lots of discussion here. We should consider what the end goal is on that anyway. But we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of tabling the application signify by saying aye.
I made it.
All those opposed? So we are going to table this application. And we are going to certainly have a discussion about sign applications and where we go from here on 228 Montague Street as well. And that's not really on the agenda, so I don't know if that's to be put next month or
Through you, PAC Chair, I would have to be brought next month.
next month.
So
Okay.
I will ensure that there is a section that we'll have a discussion on process and your recommendations to council.
Just too big for new business, huh?
You can put it under new business if you want, but you set your agenda already and you've approved it.
That's
So it would have
true.
had to have been done.
That's
at
true.
that
I would have,
time.
yes, okay. You're absolutely right. Okay, thanks.
So-
It just sounded to me like there was a lot of energy to maybe move forward on it tonight. That's, and if that's what we use the time for, then great. Let's not forget. Let's use the energy and get some good advice to council going on this and decide where we go from here.
So could you just clarify for me what happens now that this is tabled?
Sandra, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think we'll add it to our meeting tomorrow and discuss enforcement priorities and how we move forward with that.
But what, sorry,
So through you, Madam Chair, essentially now that you have tabled this, it becomes an enforcement measure. And now it'll go to senior staff and the planners to discuss next processes within what should be done with the flankage yard fence.
and could you just help me understand what the options might be? Or is that?
The options could be wait a month and see what PAC does in a month. Because you tabled it for a month, it can't be tabled more than a month, I don't believe. And the applicant has rights to have their file heard and a decision made. And tabling is just pushing the decision down the line. So their enforcement could be, we're going to wait and see what PAC says and then act based on that. It could be, we will go ahead with a stop work order and start that process, which would, not quite sure how long it would take, but would either lead to the fence coming down or be the height could be changed to the height that would be allowed in that yard normally. I think those are realistically the two options.
Okay, thanks, Sander.
There was a question on right to appeal, but as the decision is a table decision, there's no actual decision by PAC. So it has to come back to PAC for you guys to make terms and conditions and a decision on it. And if there was an appeal, it would have to go through the Planning and Appeals Board. So similar to what has occurred previously, a decision of PAC would have to go to the next level, and essentially a provincial body would have to review the situation. And there would have to be a hearing, and a decision would be made by that board instead. So whatever the decision is made here, when you make your decision, if it is appealed, it goes to the next level. So it won't come back to PAC. The only reason why it's going to come back to PAC next month is because you tabled it. So now it'll come back to your table for discussion, for you to set terms and conditions again. And if the applicant feels contrary, they can appeal that, and then it goes to the next level.
Would be a cool trick to appeal when you don't have the permit.
The reason I brought it up, Annette, or Councillor Harland, is that they could have waited and we could have approved it and they got the permit and they could have built it. And there's nothing to say that we wouldn't have approved it if due process was followed. And all they have to do if they wanted to is take it down, bring it back to me next month. There's a possibility we could pass it because it's the processes. That's all I'm about. And that's it, right? So sending kind of a warning out to all contractors in the town of St. Andrews that you actually need a permit to build stuff. And I jokingly made a joke with Paul the other day. If somehow never mind. It was a conversation me and Paul had, but anyways, I'll stop there.
Madam Chair, you're just at the final step, so you're.
No new business.
No.
And no.
Oh, well, hold on a second. Put your comments in. Does anybody have comments?
Does anyone have any other comments tonight?
No.
All right. All right. So that having been said, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you. At 8:05.
Night, folks.
Good night. So I will write that about the, yeah.